You did not choose your family, yet it chose you. And that is the first truth most people spend a lifetime trying to escape. An awakened soul does not enter the world gently. It enters the world strategically, not by its own conscious will, but by the deeper intelligence that governs human nature itself. This is the unchosen battlefield. When a soul carries awareness, it is not placed in comfort. Comfort dulls perception. It is placed where friction is unavoidable, where emotions clash, where authority is flawed, and where love is conditional. Because only in such terrain does awareness sharpen into something dangerous. Alan Watts spoke of the universe as a play, a drama in which consciousness forgets itself in order to rediscover itself. But Machiavelli would interrupt and say, "Discovery without conflict creates fragile men. Power is not revealed in peace. It is revealed in tension." The awakened soul is born into a toxic family because toxicity exposes structure. It reveals who controls, who obeys, who manipulates, and who survives. In healthy environments, power hides behind kindness. In toxic ones, power removes its mask. From the first years of life, the awakened child senses something others accept blindly. That love is often a transaction. That approval comes with invisible conditions. That silence is sometimes safer than honesty. These realizations are not taught. They are absorbed. This family becomes the first political system the awakened soul must study. There are rulers who demand loyalty but offer no understanding. There are enforcers of tradition who fear questions. There are emotional currencies traded for obedience. And there is punishment, not always physical, but psychological, subtle, and persistent. Machiavelli taught that the wise observer studies power where it is most naked. The toxic household is precisely that place. It is governance stripped of elegance. The awakened soul learns early that authority does not equal wisdom. That age does not equal maturity. That dominance often comes from insecurity, not strength. This knowledge is dangerous because it cannot be unlearned. Most children adapt by surrendering themselves. They become what the family demands. They trade authenticity for survival. But the awakened soul adapts differently. It observes. It watches patterns repeat. It notices emotional cycles. It senses hypocrisy before language forms. It understands mood before meaning. This heightened awareness is not a gift given by kindness. It is forced by necessity. Alan Watts would say the ego forms where resistance exists. The awakened soul's ego does not inflate. It sharpens. It becomes precise, discerning, quiet. In this battlefield, the awakened soul realizes something terrifying and liberating. No one is coming to save them. This realization breaks many, but those who endure it gain sovereignty. Because when protection is absent, self-reliance is born. The toxic family unknowingly trains the awakened soul to detach from approval. Every withheld affection teaches independence. Every manipulation teaches discernment. Every unjust accusation teaches emotional restraint. This is not cruelty by design, but cruelty by unconsciousness. And unconscious systems always sacrifice those who see too clearly. Machiavelli warned that those who challenge power without strategy are destroyed. So the awakened soul learns patience. They learn silence as a weapon. They learn timing. They learn when to retreat and when to observe. This is not weakness. This is preparation. The battlefield is unchosen because choice would soften the lesson. If you could leave easily, you would never understand domination. If love were consistent, you would never question authority. If safety were guaranteed, you would never discover your inner fortress. Alan Watts often reminded that suffering awakens the question, who am I? But Machiavelli answers that question with another, who benefits if you never ask? Toxic families demand conformity because conformity maintains order. Awakened souls disrupt order simply by existing authentically. This is why conflict feels inevitable. It is not personal, it is structural. The family resists not because you are wrong, but because you are uncontrollable. And here lies the deepest truth of the unchosen battlefield. You were not born into chaos to be consumed by it. You were born into it to understand how chaos governs people. Every argument, every silent dinner, every emotional withdrawal teaches the awakened soul the mechanics of fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of disobedience, fear of losing control. Machiavelli understood fear better than love because fear reveals truth faster. And the awakened soul, surrounded by it, becomes fluent in human weakness. This battlefield is not meant to be won through dominance. It is meant to be survived through awareness. Those who survive do not emerge innocent. They emerge informed. And once you understand power at its rawest level, once you see how authority behaves when threatened, once you realize how love is used as leverage, you can never again be ruled the same way. Pain is never accidental where awareness is involved. For the awakened soul, pain is not merely endured, it is instructive. What others experience as damage, the conscious experience as data. And nowhere is this lesson more ruthless than inside a toxic family. Alan Watts often said that the universe is not cruel, only playful. But Machiavelli would counter that play becomes deadly when power is misunderstood. Pain, then, becomes the language through which power speaks most clearly. In toxic families, pain is not loud at first. It arrives subtly, disguised as neglect, comparison, invalidation, or emotional withdrawal. There are no visible wounds, yet the impact is precise. It teaches the awakened soul where power is applied and where resistance is punished. This is how power hides in pain. The awakened soul begins to notice that suffering is selective. Those who conform are rewarded with temporary peace. Those who question are met with tension. Those who assert identity are met with guilt. This pattern reveals a truth Machiavelli understood deeply. Power fears independence more than disobedience. Pain is used not to correct behavior, but to shape identity. The family does not say, "You are wrong." It says, "You are difficult." It does not say, "This rule is unfair." It says, "You are ungrateful." Through these distortions, pain becomes a tool of governance. Alan Watts spoke of the ego as a social construct, shaped by approval and rejection. In toxic families, rejection becomes systematic, and the awakened soul learns that identity imposed through pain is false. This realization marks a turning point. The soul stops asking, "How do I become acceptable?" and starts asking, "Who am I?" when approval is removed. Pain strips away the illusion that love is unconditional. It reveals that affection is often a currency traded for obedience. Machiavelli would recognize this immediately. Control maintained through emotional dependency is the oldest form of rule. The awakened soul, subjected to this rule, develops a rare strength. They learn to feel without collapsing. They learn to endure without surrendering identity. They learn to separate emotion from decision. This is power hidden in pain. While others seek comfort, the awakened soul gains clarity. While others numb themselves, the awakened soul sharpens awareness. Pain forces introspection. It demands meaning, and meaning awakens sovereignty. Alan Watts taught that suffering ends when the illusion of the self dissolves. But before dissolution, there is recognition. The awakened soul recognizes that pain is not personal. It is structural, it is inherited, it is unconscious. This recognition is dangerous because it dissolves guilt. Once guilt fades, control weakens. Toxic families rely on guilt to maintain dominance. Guilt keeps the awakened soul emotionally tethered. Pain reminds them of consequence, but awareness transforms pain into information. The awakened soul begins to see patterns instead of wounds. They notice that certain behaviors trigger punishment, that certain truths provoke silence, that certain boundaries provoke anger. Machiavelli taught that knowledge of patterns is the foundation of power. Those who understand cause and effect cannot be easily manipulated. Pain, when understood, becomes immunity. The awakened soul no longer reacts impulsively. They respond strategically. They choose when to speak. They choose when to withdraw. They choose when to observe. This does not harden the heart, it fortifies it. Alan Watts warned against becoming trapped in resistance. The awakened soul does not fight pain blindly. They integrate it. They use it to understand human fear, because pain reveals insecurity faster than kindness ever could. Those who inflict pain unconsciously do so to protect fragile identities. They fear loss of control. They fear exposure. They fear irrelevance. The awakened soul, watching closely, learns that dominance often masks terror. This insight is transformative. Once you see that pain is administered by fear, you stop internalizing it. You stop believing it defines you. You stop allowing it to shape your worth. Machiavelli understood that rulers lose power the moment subjects stop believing in their moral authority. The awakened soul withdraws belief silently. No confrontation, no rebellion, only detachment. This detachment is not coldness. It is clarity without illusion. Pain has done its work. The awakened soul emerges with an internal authority that cannot be revoked. They no longer seek permission to exist authentically. They no longer require validation to feel real. They no longer confuse suffering with meaning. Power, once hidden in pain, becomes visible, and once visible, it is no longer feared. The strongest chains are never made of iron. They are made of loyalty, fear, obligation, and guilt. And because they cannot be seen, most people spend their entire lives dragging them without realizing they are bound. For the awakened soul, this is where the real battle begins. Alan Watts spoke often about liberation, but not the kind achieved through rebellion. He spoke of awakening as seeing through the illusion of the self and the roles imposed upon it. Machiavelli, however, would remind us that illusions are maintained by systems that benefit from belief. And nowhere is belief enforced more subtly than within the family. Invisible chains are forged early. They are created through phrases that sound like love but function like commands. After all we've done for you. This is how our family works. You owe us. Blood is thicker than anything else. These words do not strike the body, they bind the mind. The awakened soul senses this long before it can articulate it. There is a feeling of being watched even in silence, of being judged even when alone, of carrying responsibility that was never consciously accepted. This is psychological inheritance. The family does not need to control behavior when it controls identity. Once the awakened soul believes their worth is tied to obedience, the chains lock themselves. Machiavelli understood that the most effective rulers make subjects police themselves. The awakened soul's awakening begins when they notice their own inner censor. The voice that says, "Do not speak, do not disappoint, do not leave, do not become too different." Alan Watts would call this voice the ego, shaped by social conditioning. But Machiavelli would call it something else: internalized authority. Breaking invisible chains does not begin with confrontation. Confrontation often strengthens the system it seeks to destroy. The awakened soul does not revolt loudly. They disengage quietly. The first chain to break is the belief that family equals truth. Toxic families often present themselves as moral authorities. They claim tradition as wisdom, hierarchy as order, control as care. The awakened soul begins to see the contradiction. If love requires fear, it is not love. If loyalty demands silence, it is not loyalty. If belonging requires self-erasure, it is domination. This realization is not dramatic. It is lonely. Alan Watts said, "Awakening feels like standing alone in a crowd." Machiavelli would add that loneliness is the price of sovereignty. As the chains loosen, resistance increases. Guilt becomes louder, manipulation becomes subtler, emotional pressure intensifies. This is not coincidence. Systems react when control weakens. The awakened soul must now master restraint. To argue is to invite engagement. To explain is to seek permission. To defend is to validate authority. Machiavelli warned that those who justify themselves place power in the hands of their accusers. So the awakened soul chooses a different path. They stop over-explaining. They stop seeking understanding from those invested in misunderstanding them. They stop performing loyalty. This is not cruelty. It is clarity. The invisible chains weaken as emotional dependency dissolves. When guilt no longer triggers obedience, the system loses leverage. When fear no longer dictates decisions, control collapses. Alan Watts spoke of freedom as letting go of the need to be someone. In toxic families, freedom is letting go of the need to be acceptable. The awakened soul learns to disappoint without guilt, to distance without hatred, to separate without betrayal. This is the most misunderstood phase of awakening. From the outside, it looks cold. From within, it feels honest. Machiavelli knew that power shifts silently before it collapses visibly. The awakened soul does not announce liberation. They live it. They redefine loyalty as integrity. They redefine respect as mutuality. They redefine love as non-ownership. The chains finally break not when the family changes, but when the awakened soul no longer reacts to the old triggers. No anger, no pleading, no defense, only choice. This is the moment authority evaporates. Alan Watts taught that enlightenment is the realization that there is nothing to defend. Machiavelli would recognize this as the highest form of power. When you cannot be controlled by fear, when guilt no longer commands your actions, when obligation no longer overrides truth, you are no longer bound. And what remains is not rebellion, but sovereignty. Detachment is not abandonment. It is not coldness, and it is not escape. Detachment is mastery without aggression, power without display, and clarity without resentment. It is the final evolution of the awakened soul forged in chaos. Alan Watts spoke of detachment as the ability to play the game without being consumed by it. Machiavelli, observing rulers and survivors alike, understood something sharper. Those who cannot detach are easily ruled. In toxic families, attachment is weaponized. Love is offered with conditions. Approval is granted temporarily. Belonging is exchanged for obedience. The awakened soul learns early that emotional closeness often comes at the price of self-erasure. Detachment begins the moment the soul realizes that proximity is not the same as connection. You can be close to those who do not see you. You can be loyal to those who do not respect you. And you can love those who use love as leverage. This realization is painful, but it is clarifying. Alan Watts would say suffering arises from clinging. Machiavelli would say domination survives through attachment. The awakened soul stands at the intersection of these truths. Detachment is not about cutting people off dramatically. It is about removing their authority over your inner world. Their words lose weight. Their moods lose power. Their approval loses value. This is where mastery begins. The awakened soul no longer reacts impulsively to provocation. They do not chase validation. They do not explain their worth. They do not beg to be understood. Machiavelli warned that those who reveal emotional dependence invite manipulation. So the awakened soul learns to respond with measured silence, not as punishment, but as self-preservation. Alan Watts spoke of the illusion of control, how people cling to roles to avoid uncertainty. Toxic families cling harder than most. They resist change because it threatens the identity they have constructed. Detachment allows the awakened soul to step outside this resistance. They stop trying to reform the family. They stop hoping for emotional recognition. They stop replaying old wounds seeking closure. Closure is not given by those who benefit from confusion. Mastery through detachment means choosing peace over explanation. It means allowing others to misunderstand you without correction. It means letting go of the fantasy that love will one day arrive if you endure long enough. Machiavelli understood that hope can be as dangerous as fear. Both keep people waiting. The awakened soul stops waiting. This does not create bitterness. It creates precision. The awakened soul becomes selective with energy. They engage where respect exists. They withdraw where manipulation thrives. They observe without absorbing. Alan Watts described enlightenment as realizing you are not the thoughts you think. Detachment extends this realization to relationships. You are not the projections placed upon you. You are not the roles assigned to you. You are not the expectations imposed upon you. The family may resist this transformation. Detachment disrupts familiar dynamics. Control fades when reactions disappear. Drama collapses when participation ends. Machiavelli would recognize this as a silent transfer of power. The awakened soul does not announce boundaries. They embody them. They do not threaten distance. They practice it. They do not demand respect. They operate beyond disrespect. This mastery is subtle. It cannot be argued against. It cannot be punished effectively because it does not attack. Alan Watts said that the highest wisdom is knowing when not to interfere. Detachment is non-interference with manipulation. The awakened soul may still feel love, empathy, even sadness. Detachment does not erase emotion. It places emotion in its proper role. Emotion informs, but does not command. Machiavelli observed that rulers who allowed emotion to govern decisions fell quickly. The awakened soul governs the inner kingdom with clarity. They understand that forgiveness does not require access, that compassion does not require submission, that understanding does not require proximity. This is the final alchemy. Pain becomes insight. Distance becomes strength. Silence becomes authority. Mastery through detachment is not about winning against the family. It is about no longer needing to win. When nothing can be taken from you emotionally, when no reaction can be provoked, when no guilt can command you, you are no longer governed by the past.